The doctor said he only had a 1% chance, but what the boy did next no one expected. Amanda Johnson wiped away the tears that wouldn't stop flowing as she watched her 4-year-old daughter Emily, who kept pointing insistently at her 2-year-old brother Ethan, lying in the hospital bed, hooked up to various machines. The little girl repeated the same words that left all the adults baffled. "He wants to play, Mommy, but he's too tired inside." Dr. Thompson had just left the room after delivering the heartbreaking diagnosis to the parents. Ethan suffered from a rare condition that prevented his body from processing nutrients properly, and his chances of recovery were just 1%. Michael Johnson, the truck driver father who worked day and night to pay the medical bills, tried to stay strong but felt the world crumbling around him. "Emily, sweetheart, Ethan needs to rest," Amanda said, her voice trembling as she gently tried to pull the girl away from the bed. "But Mommy, he's telling me he wants to play with his toy cars. He said his tummy hurts, but if I stay here, he won't be as sad." Emily insisted with the stubborn determination only children possess. Michael let out a deep sigh and moved closer to his wife. They had been in that private hospital in Portland for 3 weeks now, using up every penny of their savings. Amanda had taken leave from the school where she taught, and he had stopped taking long-haul trips to spend more time with the family. "Doctor, are you sure there's nothing else you can do?" Michael had asked minutes earlier, his eyes filled with desperate hope. "Mr. Johnson, I understand your pain, but medicine has its limits. We'll continue supportive care, but prepare for the worst," Dr. Thompson replied, lowering his gaze. Now, watching Emily whisper to Ethan as if he could answer, Amanda felt a mix of tenderness and despair. The little girl had changed completely since her brother fell ill. Before, she had been a mischievous child, running around the house and making a mess. Now she spent hours sitting by his bed, telling stories and promising they'd teach Ethan to ride a bike when he got out of the hospital. "Sweetie, let's go get something to eat in the cafeteria," Amanda suggested, trying to distract Emily. "I can't leave Ethan alone, Mommy. He gets scared when no one's here," the girl replied without taking her eyes off her brother. Just then, Mrs. Eleanor, the boy's paternal grandmother, walked into the room carrying a bag of belongings. The 68-year-old widow, who had traveled from Eugene to help the family, brought more tension than comfort. "Amanda, you can't let this girl keep believing in fantasies. Ethan isn't going to—" She stopped mid-sentence when she saw her son's warning look. "Mom, please, not in front of Emily," Michael murmured. "You're spending your last dime on a hopeless situation. You need to think about Emily's future too," Mrs. Eleanor continued, lowering her voice. "But not enough for her granddaughter to miss it." Emily turned to her grandmother, her eyes glistening with tears. For the first time since this ordeal began, the little girl looked truly upset. "Grandma, Ethan's going to get better. I promised him that when we leave here, we'll play at the park near our house. He said he wants to go on the little slide first." Mrs. Eleanor sighed and shook her head, convinced her granddaughter was lost in a fantasy world. But Michael watched closely as Emily interacted with Ethan. There was something different there, something he couldn't explain but felt deep in his heart. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing. That night, when everyone went to rest in the small apartment Michael had rented near the hospital, Emily refused to sleep. She sat in the chair beside Ethan's bed, whispering words no one could quite understand. Nurse Susan, a seasoned 55-year-old nurse who had worked at the hospital for over 20 years, entered the room to check Ethan's vitals. She had observed Emily over the past few days and was deeply moved by the girl's devotion. "Emily, sweetheart, don't you want to get some rest?" Nurse Susan asked kindly. "I can't, Auntie. Ethan's having nightmares and I need to tell him a good story so he dreams of beautiful things," Emily replied, gently stroking her brother's little hand. Nurse Susan checked the monitors and noticed something that puzzled her. Whenever Emily was present, Ethan's vitals seemed more stable. She decided to jot this down to discuss with Dr. Thompson in the morning. "What story are you telling him?" the nurse asked curiously. "I tell him about when we grow up, and he'll be my best friend. I'll teach him how to brush his teeth by himself, tie his shoes, and when he's all grown up, he'll protect me from the mean boys at school, Emily said with a sweet smile. The girl's words touched Nurse Susan's heart. In all her years working with sick children, she had never witnessed such a strong bond between siblings. There was something special here that went beyond medicine. The next day, while Amanda spoke with a social worker about treatment costs, Emily managed to slip out of the room. The girl had noticed other rooms down the hall with other children and adults who looked as sad as her family. She lightly knocked on the door of room 512 and peeked inside. There sat an elderly woman with white hair, around 75 years old, who was alone, gazing out the window. The woman turned at the sound and was surprised to see the little girl at the door. "Hello, dear. Are you lost?" the woman asked gently. "No, Auntie. I came to see if you're sad like my mommy. If you are, I can tell you a story too," Emily replied, stepping into the room without hesitation. The woman, Mrs. Catherine Williams, was a childless widow who had been admitted for routine tests. She hadn't had visitors in weeks and felt terribly lonely. "What kind of story do you know?" Mrs. Catherine asked, patting the space beside her on the bed. Emily climbed onto the bed with the agility of a child and began telling her about Ethan, how he was going to get better, and all the plans they had together. Mrs. Catherine was charmed by the girl's positive energy and for the first time in weeks gave a genuine smile. "And your little brother, does he like these stories?" Mrs. Catherine asked. "He loves them. He always smiles when I tell them. Sometimes he can't open his eyes because he's too tired, but I know he's listening because his heart gets calmer," Emily explained with the certainty of someone stating an absolute truth. When Amanda realized Emily had left the room, she panicked. She and Michael searched everywhere until Nurse Susan directed them to room 512. There they found Emily chatting animatedly with Mrs. Catherine, who looked like a different person. "Emily, you scared me," Amanda exclaimed, rushing to scoop up her daughter. "Sorry, Mommy, Mrs. Catherine was sad and I wanted to help. She said no one comes to visit her," Emily explained, showing no remorse. Mrs. Catherine looked at Emily's parents with genuine interest. She had noticed the family's simple clothes and realized they were going through financial difficulties. "Don't worry, she wasn't any trouble at all. It's been a long time since I've had such a pleasant visit," said Mrs. Catherine. "Tell me about her little brother." Michael, always a man of few words, briefly explained Ethan's condition. Mrs. Catherine listened carefully, observing how Emily reacted to every word her father said. The girl didn't show sadness or despair, just an unshakable confidence that everything would work out. "May I go see the boy?" asked Mrs. Catherine. Amanda hesitated. She didn't want strangers seeing Ethan in that state, but there was something in the older woman's voice that felt sincere. When they reached Ethan's room, Mrs. Catherine was surprised by what she saw. The boy was very thin and pale, hooked up to several machines, but there was a peace in his face she hadn't expected. Emily immediately ran to the bedside and started talking to her brother. "Ethan, look who came to visit. It's Mrs. Catherine. She's really nice and said, when you get better, she'll take us to see her house. It has a really big garden," Emily said, as if Ethan could respond. Mrs. Catherine was moved watching the siblings interact. She had never had children of her own, but had always dreamed of a family. Seeing this little girl fighting so determinedly for her brother's life stirred something in her heart. That afternoon, Dr. Thompson made his daily rounds to check on Ethan. He noticed Mrs. Catherine's presence and was surprised to recognize her. "Mrs. Catherine, I didn't expect to see you here. How are your test results?" he asked politely. "Hello, Dr. Thompson. The tests are fine, thank you. But I came to meet this little fighter," she replied, looking at Ethan. The doctor found his patient's interest unusual but didn't comment. He checked Ethan's vitals and, to his surprise, noticed a slight improvement in the numbers. It wasn't medically significant, but it was the first time in weeks the indicators hadn't worsened. "Doctor, does this mean he's getting better?" Emily asked, having watched the entire examination closely. "Well, Emily, these are small fluctuations that can happen. We shouldn't get our hopes up too much," Dr. Thompson answered, trying to be realistic without crushing the child's expectations. But Nurse Susan, who was recording the data, exchanged a meaningful glance with the doctor. She had noticed the improvements coincided exactly with the moments Emily was present. It defied medical logic, but she couldn't ignore it. That night, after everyone had left, Mrs. Catherine stayed at the hospital. She had asked her private doctors to review Ethan's case, curious to better understand the boy's condition. As a woman of means, she had access to the best specialists in the country. When Dr. Thompson learned of Mrs. Catherine's initiative, he was intrigued. He knew her reputation in the city, a retired businesswoman who had built a small empire in the garment industry and, after her husband's death, quietly devoted herself to charity work. "Mrs. Catherine, may I ask what your interest is in Ethan's case?" the doctor questioned during a chance meeting in the hallway. "Doctor, in my 75 years, I've learned some things can't be explained by logic. That little girl has a connection with her brother that goes beyond what we understand. I want to help if I can," she answered sincerely. Dr. Thompson sighed. He was a man of science, trained at the best universities, but the last few days had made him question some of his certainties. Ethan's small improvements were inexplicable, and Emily's presence truly seemed to make a difference. "What do you have in mind?" he asked, curious. "I know some specialists in New York who work with rare cases. I'd like to cover a second opinion, maybe some more advanced tests. It's worth a try," proposed Mrs. Catherine. While the adults discussed medical possibilities, Emily continued her routine of conversations with Ethan. She had created an imaginary world where the two of them were superheroes helping other sick children get better. During these talks, she promised her brother that once he recovered, they would do so many things together. "Ethan, today I met a really nice lady. She said she has a garden with flowers of every color. When you get better, we'll go there and plant a flower for every day you were in the hospital. It'll be the most beautiful garden in the world," Emily whispered, holding her brother's cold little hand. Michael watched these scenes every day, his heart heavy. As a father, he wanted to shield Emily from the potential pain of losing her brother, yet he admired his daughter's strength and hope. Amanda, on the other hand, was torn between supporting their daughter and preparing her for a possible goodbye. One evening, when Mrs. Eleanor was looking after Emily at the apartment, Amanda and Michael had a difficult conversation in the hospital hallway. "Michael, I don't know what to do anymore. Emily lives in a world where Ethan will get better, but what if he doesn't? How do we explain it to her?" Amanda confessed. "Amanda, I don't know either. But watching our daughter, I've started to believe maybe she knows something we don't. It might sound crazy, but..." Michael hesitated. "But what?" Amanda pressed. "Have you noticed that whenever Emily is with Ethan, he seems calmer? The machines stop beeping so much he breathes better. It might be a coincidence, but..." Michael searched his wife's face for understanding. Amanda sighed deeply. She had noticed those details too, but as a teacher, she always sought logical explanations for everything. Accepting that a 4-year-old might have some kind of special intuition challenged everything she believed. The next morning, Dr. Thompson arrived at the hospital with an unexpected proposal. The specialists in New York whom Mrs. Catherine had contacted were willing to evaluate Ethan's case, but they wanted to do something unusual: observe the siblings' interactions as part of the diagnosis. It's an unconventional approach, but these doctors have worked with impossible cases for decades. They believe emotional factors and family connections can influence recovery in ways we don't yet fully understand, Dr. Thompson explained to the parents. Michael and Amanda exchanged glances. The idea seemed strange, but they were willing to try anything. "What would that mean in practice?" Amanda asked. They'd come here to observe Ethan for a few days, with Emily present most of the time. They want to document his reactions, run some additional tests, and possibly suggest a different treatment plan, the doctor replied. When they told Emily about the special doctor's visit, the little girl was thrilled. "They'll see Ethan talking to me. I always knew the grown-ups would understand someday," she said, clapping her hands. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing. Mrs. Eleanor, who had been skeptical from the start, began to soften as she watched Emily hold on to hope even in the hardest moments. The grandmother had spent the last few days observing her granddaughter, amazed by the child's emotional maturity. "Michael, perhaps I was too hard on you all. That girl has something special, I can't deny that," admitted Mrs. Eleanor during a conversation with her son. "Mom, I know you want to protect us from more pain, but Emily taught us that sometimes you have to have faith even when everything seems lost," replied Michael. In the days leading up to the specialist's arrival, something interesting happened. Emily began introducing Ethan to other patients in the hospital. With the reluctant permission of the parents and under Nurse Susan's supervision, she brought toys to the room and put on little performances where Ethan was the hero of the stories. Today, Ethan saved a princess trapped in a castle. He can't talk because he's saving his energy to fight the evil dragon that makes kids sick, Emily told a 6-year-old girl in the next room. These visits brought a different energy to the entire pediatric floor. The children who could move around came to see Ethan, and Emily always had a new story to tell. The parents of these children began gathering in the hallway, forming a small support network. Dr. Thompson watched this unfold with growing interest. There were studies about the impact of social support on patient recovery, but seeing it happen naturally, started by a 4-year-old, was extraordinary. On the eve of the specialist's arrival from New York, something unexpected happened. In the early hours of the morning, Ethan opened his eyes for the first time in 2 weeks. Nurse Susan, who was on night duty, noticed the movement while checking his vitals. "Ethan," she whispered, stepping closer to the bed. The boy looked directly at her, his eyes still hazy but clearly conscious. Nurse Susan rushed to call Dr. Thompson, who was on duty that night. When the doctor arrived, Ethan was still awake, slightly turning his head toward sounds around him. It was minimal progress, but significant for someone who had spent weeks in a near comatose state. "Should we call the parents?" asked Nurse Susan. "Yes, but let's do it carefully. We don't want to raise false hopes," replied Dr. Thompson, though he himself was visibly moved. When Michael and Amanda arrived at the hospital, accompanied by Emily and Mrs. Eleanor, they found Ethan awake but very weak. Emily ran to the bedside and held her brother's hand. "Hi, Ethan. I knew you were listening to my stories," she said with a radiant smile. To everyone's surprise, Ethan gave a faint squeeze of his sister's hand. It was barely noticeable, but Emily shrieked with joy. "He squeezed my hand! He's telling me he loves me!" the little girl exclaimed. Amanda began to cry, but this time they were tears of hope. Michael hugged his wife and both daughters, feeling as though a miracle might be happening. Dr. Thompson carefully documented the entire interaction. There was something about Emily's presence that truly seemed to draw responses from Ethan. He decided the specialist from New York needed to see this firsthand. The next morning, Dr. Rachel Anderson, a pediatric neurologist, and Dr. Richard Miller, a rare disease specialist, arrived. Both had international reputations and had agreed to evaluate the case at Mrs. Catherine's recommendation. "Dr. Thompson, we've reviewed the tests and case description. It's truly a rare condition, but we want to observe the family dynamic you mentioned," said Dr. Rachel. When the specialists met Emily, they were struck by the little girl's clarity. With a child's naturalness, she explained how she talked to Ethan and how she knew when he was feeling better or worse. "When he's sad, the machine makes a different sound. When I tell a good story, the sound gets calmer. It's easy to understand," explained Emily to the doctors. Dr. Richard, a naturally skeptical man, decided to test it. He asked Emily to leave the room and observed Ethan's monitors for 30 minutes. Then he had her return and stay by her brother's side. The change was subtle but noticeable. Ethan's vital signs stabilized when Emily came back, and he even managed to move his eyes toward her voice. "This is interesting," murmured Dr. Richard to his colleague. "There might be a neurological explanation for this response." Over the next 3 days, the specialists ran several tests on Ethan and observed dozens of interactions between the siblings. They documented every response, every small improvement, every moment Ethan seemed to react to Emily's presence. Dr. Rachel decided to speak with Emily privately, without her parents present. "Emily, tell me something. How do you know Ethan can hear you?" asked the doctor. "It's hard to explain to grown-ups. It's like when you're hungry and know you want to eat, but you can't explain why. I just feel like he's in there waiting to get strong again, replied Emily, playing with a doll Mrs. Catherine had given her. And are you afraid of anything? The doctor continued. Emily stopped playing and looked directly into the doctor's eyes. I'm afraid the grown-ups will give up on Ethan before he's ready to get out of bed. He said he just needs a little more time to get strong, the girl said with a seriousness that impressed the specialist. This conversation made Dr. Rachel reflect on her own medical practice. In all her years as a doctor, she had seen cases of inexplicable recoveries, always attributed to luck or unknown factors. Maybe there was more complexity to human connections than traditional medicine recognized. Meanwhile, Mrs. Catherine had practically become part of the family. She visited Ethan every day, brought gifts for Emily, and had even offered to help financially with any necessary treatment. Why are you doing all this for us? Asked Amanda during one of the visits. My dear, when you reach my age, you realize money only has value if it's used to do good. And this family has given me something I thought I'd never have, the feeling of having grandchildren, replied Mrs. Catherine, her eyes misty. The answer deeply moved Amanda. She had assumed Mrs. Catherine was just a wealthy woman trying to feel good about charity, but now she saw there was much more behind that generosity. On the fourth day of the specialist's evaluation, something happened that would change everything. Ethan didn't just wake up, he managed to whisper a word. Emily. Emily was telling a story about two birds flying together when she heard her brother's faint voice. She stopped mid-sentence and stared at him with wide eyes. Ethan, you said my name, she shouted, jumping with joy. All the adults in the room fell silent. Dr. Richard had been taking notes when he heard the word, and Dr. Rachel immediately stepped closer to check Ethan's level of consciousness. The boy was awake, looking straight at Emily, and managed to whisper again, Story. He wants me to keep telling the story, Emily said, rushing back to the bedside. Dr. Rachel ran some basic neurological tests on Ethan and was amazed by his responses. The boy could follow simple commands and reacted appropriately to stimuli. Dr. Thompson, we need to reassess the entire prognosis. This neurological response wasn't expected given his condition, Dr. Rachel said privately. Dr. Thompson nodded, still trying to process what he was seeing. In 20 years of medicine, he had never witnessed such a rapid and unexpected recovery. Do you think Emily really made a difference? He asked his colleagues. We can't scientifically prove it, but the data is clear. Ethan's improvements coincide exactly with the moments of greatest interaction with his sister. There may be factors we don't yet understand about family connections and neurological recovery, replied Dr. Richard. In the following days, Ethan continued to improve. He could stay awake for longer periods, interacted with Emily, and even managed small smiles when she sang or told stories. Emily was radiant, but she also began showing a concern the adults hadn't expected. Mum, when Ethan gets better, will you believe me when I say other important things? She asked during lunch in the hospital cafeteria. Of course, sweetheart, why do you ask? Replied Amanda, intrigued. Because I always knew Ethan would get better, but no one believed me. Now I know other things, but I'm afraid you won't believe me again, Emily explained with surprising maturity. Michael knelt to his daughter's height and looked her in the eyes. Emily, you've taught us that sometimes children know things adults don't. I promise we'll always listen to you carefully, he said sincerely. This promise sealed a new dynamic in the Johnson family. They had learned that Emily possessed a special intuition, not just with Ethan, but in many situations. 2 weeks after the specialists arrived, Ethan was sitting up in bed, playing with simple toys and speaking in short sentences. Tests showed significant improvement in all indicators, something the doctors still couldn't fully explain. Mrs. Eleanor, who had been the most skeptical of all, apologized to Emily. My dear, Grandma was very foolish not to believe you. You knew all along Ethan would get better, didn't you? She said, hugging the girl. Grandma, you don't have to apologize. Adults sometimes need to see to believe. But now you know I always tell the truth, Emily replied, returning the hug. Dr. Thompson decided to document the entire case to present at medical conferences, not as a miracle, but as an example of how psychosocial factors can influence the recovery of critically ill patients. This case will change how I practice medicine. I'll pay much more attention to family dynamics and children's perceptions, he remarked to Dr. Rachel. When it was time for discharge, the entire hospital staff had grown attached to the Johnson family. Nurse Susan cried while saying goodbye to Emily, and even Dr. Richard, known for his professional detachment, was moved. "Emily, you've taught us that medicine must look not just at the body, but at the heart too," he said, handing her a farewell gift. Mrs. Catherine, who had become like a surrogate grandmother to the children, made an unexpected offer to Michael and Amanda. "I'd like to help you start over. I have a guest house on my property that's been empty for years. You could live there, Michael could work for me tending the gardens, and Amanda could give private lessons to neighborhood children. What do you think?" she offered. The proposal was tempting, but Michael hesitated. He didn't want to seem like he was taking advantage of the woman's kindness. "Mrs. Catherine, you've already done so much for us," he began. "Michael, I'm not offering charity. I'm building a family. At 75, I've discovered that chosen grandchildren are even more special than those by blood," she interrupted with a smile. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing. The Johnson family accepted the offer and moved into the guest house on Mrs. Catherine's property in Portland. It was a simple but cozy home, with a small garden where Ethan could play while he fully recovered. Emily kept up her routine of telling stories to Ethan, but now he actively responded, asking questions and even suggesting changes to the characters' adventures. "Emily, tell the one about the dragon who became friends with the kids," Ethan would ask, still speaking slowly but with increasing clarity. "Oh, that's one of my favorites," Emily would reply, always excited to share her stories. Over the following months, Ethan had regular medical checkups and continued recovering beyond all expectations. Dr. Thompson visited the family monthly, not just to monitor Ethan's health, but because he'd grown especially fond of them all. Amanda started giving private lessons to local children, many of whom were children of Mrs. Catherine's employees. She discovered she had a special talent for working with kids who had learning difficulties, using methods Emily had inadvertently taught her. Michael tended to the property's extensive gardens and found a passion for gardening he never knew he had. Mrs. Catherine taught him about different types of plants and flowers, and together they created a therapeutic garden where Ethan did his physical therapy exercises. Mrs. Eleanor moved to a small house in the same town to be closer to the family. She had changed since her hospital experience, becoming a more affectionate and understanding grandmother. "That girl changed all of us," she often remarked to her friends. A year after Ethan was discharged, the family received a special visit. Dr. Rachel and Dr. Richard came to check on the boy's progress and were amazed by his full recovery. "Ethan, do you remember being in the hospital?" Dr. Rachel asked. "A little, but I remember Emily was always with me. She told stories and I knew I'd get better," replied Ethan, now 3 years old and speaking fluently. "And how did you know you'd get better?" the doctor continued. "Because Emily promised we'd play together when I got out, and Emily never breaks her promises," Ethan explained with the simple logic of a child. Dr. Richard noted these answers for his research on the role of family connections in pediatric patient recovery. Ethan's case had become a studied example in several universities. During this visit, the doctors made an interesting discovery. They asked Emily to tell one of her stories to Ethan, but this time with equipment to measure both children's brainwaves. The results showed something surprising. When Emily told stories, her and Ethan's brainwaves synchronized in a unique way. It was as if there was a real neurological connection between the siblings. "This is scientifically fascinating," Dr. Richard remarked. "There are studies on brain synchronization between close individuals, but we've never seen something this clear in children so young." "Does it mean Emily really helped Ethan get better?" Amanda asked. "It means the connection between them is real and measurable. Medicine is just beginning to understand how these connections can influence health and recovery," Dr. Rachel explained. Emily listened with interest, but didn't seem surprised. "I always knew Ethan and I were connected. That's why I knew he'd get better," she said simply. 2 years had passed, and the Johnson family's life had settled in a way they never imagined possible. Ethan was completely healthy, attending preschool, and growing into an active, playful little boy. Emily, now 6 years old, had developed a reputation at school for her ability to sense when other children were sad or unwell. Her teacher, Mrs. Barbara, a seasoned 58-year-old educator, had noticed this special trait. "Amanda, I need to talk to you about Emily," Mrs. Barbara said during a parent-teacher meeting. Amanda grew worried, thinking her daughter had misbehaved. "Did she do something wrong?" she asked. "Quite the opposite. She has a special gift for caring for her classmates. Last week she told me Tyler had a stomachache before he even complained, and on Thursday she comforted Olivia, who was crying because her parents were fighting at home. Emily seems to know things other children don't notice," the teacher explained. Amanda smiled but wasn't surprised. Since their experience with Ethan, the whole family had learned to recognize and value Emily's special intuition. "Mrs. Barbara, Emily has always been this way. We've learned to trust what she says even when it seems impossible," Amanda replied. During this time, Mrs. Catherine had officially become the children's grandma. She attended every family celebration and had included Michael, Amanda, Emily, and Ethan in her will as her heirs. "You've given me the family I always wanted. Now I want to make sure you always have security and opportunities," she explained to Michael and Amanda. But the biggest surprise was yet to come. During a routine checkup with Dr. Thompson, he shared unexpected news. "Johnson family, I have something important to tell you. Ethan's case has been studied by researchers from several countries, and they want to propose something groundbreaking," the doctor said with a mysterious smile. "What would that be?" Michael asked curiously. "They want to create a pilot program where siblings and family members actively participate in the treatment of hospitalized children. The program would be called the Emily Project, in honor of our little heroine," Dr. Thompson explained. Emily's eyes widened as she looked at Ethan. "Did you hear that, Ethan? We're going to help other kids get better like you did," she exclaimed excitedly. "Cool. Can I tell stories too?" Ethan asked eagerly. Dr. Thompson laughed and nodded. "Of course you can, Ethan. You two would be the program's first junior consultants." The Emily Project was launched 6 months later at the hospital where Ethan had been treated. Emily and Ethan visited other sick children, always accompanied by adults, telling stories and playing games. The results were astonishing. Children who received visits from the Johnson siblings showed improved moods, better cooperation with treatment, and in some cases, faster recoveries than expected. Nurse Susan, who had become the project coordinator, carefully documented every case. "It's amazing how the presence of healthy, optimistic children positively influences the patients," she remarked to Dr. Thompson. "Emily taught us that medicine doesn't just treat illnesses, it treats whole people with their fears, hopes, and family connections," the doctor replied. During one of these visits, Emily met a 5-year-old girl named Madison, who was hospitalized with a condition similar to what Ethan had faced. Madison's parents were desperate, just as Michael and Amanda had once been. "Emily, do you think Madison will get better like Ethan did?" the girl's mother asked, tears in her eyes. Emily held Madison's hand and stayed silent for a few moments, as if listening to something. "She'll get better, but it will take a bit longer than Ethan. She's more stubborn," said Emily, with her characteristic straightforwardness. "Stubborn how?" asked Madison's father. "She wants to make sure you'll keep giving her attention after she leaves the hospital. Sometimes kids get sick when they feel their parents don't have time for them," Emily explained, leaving all the adults surprised by the depth of her observation. Madison's family reflected on those words and realized they had indeed been too busy with work and other responsibilities before their daughter fell ill. They decided to shift their priorities. 2 weeks later, Madison began showing signs of improvement. Not as fast as Ethan, but steady progress, just as Emily had predicted. Dr. Thompson started documenting Emily's predictions and was amazed by her accuracy. It was as if she could sense the emotional factors influencing the children's recovery. "Emily, how do you know these things about the other kids?" he asked during one of their conversations. "It's the same with Ethan. I hear what they don't say with their mouths but speak with their hearts." Sometimes they're sick because they're sad. Other times they're sad because they're sick. It's different for each one, Emily explained. This made Dr. Thompson reconsider many aspects of his medical practice. He began paying more attention to the emotional well-being of his patients and their families. The Emily Project grew, and other hospitals in the region started implementing similar programs. Emily and Ethan became local celebrities, but always remained humble and down-to-earth. During an interview with a local newspaper, the reporter asked Emily what her dream for the future was. "I want to be a doctor, but a different kind of doctor. I want to care for people's hearts, not just their bodies. And I want to teach other doctors how to listen to what children have to say," she answered with determination. Ethan, standing beside her, added, "And I'll help Emily. We always do things together." The article touched many people in the city, and the family began receiving letters from other families going through similar struggles. Mrs. Catherine suggested creating a foundation to support these families, offering not just financial help, but also emotional support through the program inspired by Emily and Ethan. "What if we call it the Heart Connections Foundation?" she proposed during a family dinner. "That's perfect," Emily exclaimed, "because that's how Ethan and I healed, through the connection of our hearts." The foundation was officially established on the 3rd anniversary of Ethan's hospital discharge. The launch event was attended by Dr. Thompson, Dr. Rachel Anderson, Dr. Richard Miller, Nurse Susan, and many families helped by the Emily Project. During the event, Dr. Miller presented a scientific study based on Ethan's case and the results of the Emily Project. The study provided concrete evidence of how strong emotional connections can positively influence pediatric patients' recovery. This work began with a 4-year-old girl who refused to give up on her brother. Today, we have scientific data proving the importance of these connections in medicine, he said during his presentation. Emily, now 7, took the stage to speak. "I just want to tell all the kids and parents out there, never give up on each other. Sometimes we get sick, sometimes we get sad, but if we stick together, we always find a way to get better again," she said, receiving a standing ovation. Ethan, now 4 and completely healthy, also wanted to speak. "I want to thank my sister Emily because she never gave up on me. And I want to tell all the sick children, you will get better because there's always someone who loves you," he said, with the same conviction as his sister. Not a single eye in the audience stayed dry. Families who had gone through similar experiences were moved to see how 2 such young children could convey so much hope and wisdom. In the years that followed, the Heart Connections Foundation grew and began operating in several hospitals across New York. Emily and Ethan continued participating in the activities, always accompanied by their family and supervised by qualified professionals. Emily truly followed her dream of studying medicine, but in a different way. As a child, she gave talks at universities, sharing her experience with Ethan and explaining to future doctors the importance of listening to families and the children themselves. Ethan developed a special talent for art and began drawing and painting pieces that were sold to raise funds for the foundation. His drawings always depicted happy, healthy children, conveying the same hope he had received from his sister during their difficult days in the hospital. Dr. Thompson became the director of a new department at the hospital, focused on humanized medicine and treatments that included family support as an integral part of the healing process. Nurse Susan was promoted to head nursing coordinator and implemented protocols that included observing family dynamics as part of patient assessments. Mrs. Catherine, despite her advanced age, remained active in the foundation and became a tireless advocate for the rights of hospitalized children. She often said that Emily and Ethan gave her purpose and joy in her later years. Michael and Amanda became regional coordinators for the foundation, traveling across the state to implement similar programs in other hospitals. They became experts in family support during medical crises. Mrs. Eleanor became a dedicated volunteer, using her experience as a grandmother to counsel other families going through tough times. 5 years after it all began, during a celebration of the foundation's anniversary, Emily, now 9 years old, shared a reflection that surprised all the adults present. "You know, I always thought I saved Ethan, But the truth is, he saved me too. He taught me that loving someone means never giving up, even when everything seems impossible. And that changed our whole family, she said in her speech. Ethan, now 6, added, "And we learned that when a family truly comes together, amazing things can happen. It's not magic, it's love." The audience fell silent for a moment, absorbing the depth of those words coming from such young children. Dr. Thompson stepped up to the microphone and said, "5 years ago I was a doctor who believed only in what I could measure and prove. Emily and Ethan taught me there are forces in medicine beyond what we learn in textbooks. They made me a better doctor, and more importantly, a better person." The event ended with all the families joining in a large circle, symbolizing the network of support and connections that had emerged from the experience of one simple family from upstate New York. Today, Emily is 12 and Ethan 9. They remain inseparable and still actively participate in the foundation, but now as teenagers with their own projects and dreams. Emily is truly pursuing medicine, but with a focus on child psychology and integrative medicine. She wants to create a new treatment model that considers not just physical symptoms, but the entire emotional and family context of patients. Ethan developed his artistic talents and is creating an illustrated book telling their story, with the goal of giving hope to other families facing similar situations. The Heart Connections Foundation has already helped hundreds of families and influenced significant changes in how several Brazilian hospitals treat pediatric patients. The Emily Project has become a model studied in medical schools around the world. Dr. Thompson often receives invitations to speak at international conferences, always beginning his presentations with the same phrase. It all started with a 4-year-old girl who refused to accept that her brother had only a 1% chance of survival. But perhaps the greatest legacy of this entire story isn't the awards, recognitions, or changes in medicine. The greatest legacy is a family that learned true love can overcome any obstacle, and that sometimes children know things adults need to learn to listen to. On a sunny afternoon, 5 years after Ethan was discharged from the hospital, Emily and he were playing in the garden Michael had created on Mrs. Catherine's property. They were building sandcastles in a small box she had set up especially for them. "Emily, do you remember when I was in the hospital?" Ethan asked, focused on his construction. "I remember everything, Ethan." "Why?" she replied, adding a tower to the castle. "I wanted to thank you for never giving up on me. Even when I couldn't speak, I heard your stories and knew you were taking care of me," Ethan said, stopping his play to look at his sister. Emily paused too and smiled at her brother. "Ethan, I could never give up on you. We're a team, remember? And teams take care of each other," she said, hugging him. "Forever?" Ethan asked. "Forever," Emily confirmed. At that moment, watching from the window, Amanda and Michael felt in their hearts that they had created something much greater than a family. They had created a legacy of love, hope, and connection that would continue to influence lives for many generations to come. The end of the story. Now we want to hear from you. What did you think of this touching story? Do you believe in the power of family connections to overcome life's hardest moments? Leave a comment sharing your thoughts. And if you've been through something similar, tell us about your experience. Don't forget to like this story and, most importantly, subscribe to the channel so you won't miss other heartwarming tales.